Hello, everyone. My name is Matheus Mendonça. We're thrilled to be here. Just a second, I will adjust my sound here. Okay, everything is okay now. So, as I said, we're thrilled to be here hosting this event. I would like to thank you very much, all the audience watching us today on the C event platform and also on the YouTube transmission. I'm part of Optimal Energy, and Optimal Energy is sponsoring the World Hydropower Congress this year. I'm an optimization manager at this company, and the Congress' main goal is to debate the future of hydropower production, its challenges, and how the hydropower sector can help the world to achieve net zero by 2050 with decarbonization of the global economy. In this sense, we invited here today 3 speakers to talk to us about technology and ESG. ESG stands for environmental, social, and cooperative governance. So we invited them so they can speak to us about best practices they have been observing to be applied in this business development, taking into account the environmental, social impacts. And in this sense, I would like to invite our first guest, Douglas, to talk to us about machine learning and ESG. We also have Luisa here and Carla, and they will be the following speakers of our presentation. So feel free to join us on our Q&A session. Send your questions about anything you'd like related to this topic. And by the end of the session, we're going to have an open Q&A so our speakers can answer all of your questions. Okay, so Douglas, thank you very much for your presence, and you can speak about machine learning and ESG from now on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for the presence. It is a pleasure to talk about such an important subject that's been talking all over the world. It's certainly the main thing that is being talked in the conference right now. The renewables is a reality, and this reality has to take place with new technologies to help us to deliver the best we can. I am Douglas Vieira. I am the CEO of Optimal Energy. We are one of the sponsors of the conference, and we are working hard in the direction of improving the hydropower applications worldwide. So the first thing is ESG. As Matteo has pointed out, it's about environmental, social, and corporate governance. And I'd like to highlight it's the main subject of the World Hydropower Congress. And we are delivering in the next days the San Jose Declaration that says how the hydropowers will join this world movement to provide better ESG all the time. The renewables is a transition that's taking place. So this is from the Congress homepage. So it's very important, and the hydropower is one of these main solutions because it's capable to deliver the power in the moment you want to. Since I will speak about technology, the technology is machine learning, I decided to make a brief introduction about the subject. What is machine learning? So machine learning, in a very informal way, is processing data in general, any type of data. So we have many classes of machine learning that you can apply. For instance, classification is one of those, forecasting, clustering, natural language processing, and image processing, among many others. An example that you live in our daily life is spam classification. So everyone who uses a mail, like Gmail, has this classification of spams. So the classifier reads your email. Indeed, it reads the email. So you use the technology of natural language processing. So you take the words, try to understand what's taking place. And if this information, they split into groups, the ones they consider is real message and the ones that are spam. And every time you go in the button and agree it's indeed a spam, it's a new information for training the classifier. And if you say it's not a spam as well, is an information to train the classifier. So a classifier is say it belongs to a group A or a group B. So machine learning can do many things with data. Certainly all of you are looking for that in your daily life, in Instagram and many other tools that you use daily. Just to give some perspective, what's machine learning? I like the term machine learning. Machine learning is the term that was very popular during my PhD. I have attended my PhD in Brazil at Federal University of Minas Gerais and Oxford University in UK. And throughout the years, many other terms, they come and go as the hype of the moment. So here I show some relationship between the terms. So you may hear artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a broader area than machine learning. Machine learning is when you expect things to be done in a machine. But the artificial intelligence conceptually can be done everywhere. But in practical terms, what we do is machine learning. It's the reason I prefer machine learning. In the past years, it was very, very common, deep learning, especially in video processing. And when you talk about deep learning is a class of neural networks that has a very complex structure that can learn very complex problems. Usually, if a lot of data. When you have a lot of data, you call it big data. Big data is not only about the technology you are using, but also about the processing, how you process large amount of data. This large amount of data probably is processing in clouds, using servers. So this is an area that studies the best way of doing this. Also, you hear a lot about data science and data analytics. So these two technology help us to understand the data, usually looking backwards, looking from the data from the past. When you say about machine learning, you can also look forwards, make forecasting, for instance. So probably you're gonna see all those terms everywhere, and this is a little bit not very formal relationship between those terms. So I'll show you some cases, and these cases, they are very interesting about the use of machine learning in sustainability in general and ESG. So there is an asset management called Panagora, and they are using natural process languages plus sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is something that you use in conjunction with the natural process language, that after you process what is written, you try to extract what is the feeling behind the text. So what are people feeling about it? So this is one of the main points that you can do when you're talking about this greenwash. So if you take data from the social network, LinkedIn, when what people is talking about the brands, and also taking this data and benchmarking for other data, we can have the brand relevance in terms of ESG. So this asset management team are doing that, and some warning about greenwashing. Greenwashing is when you say you are green, but in fact you are just showing things instead of doing things that are real relevant. And for investments can be very dangerous. So it's very important to take a look on that. Especially today that you have to evaluate many companies simultaneously, and the public is also looking very deeply in these terms. Some of the examples I'm showing here, the last one will be specifically about hydropower generation, and I go a little deeper. It's from other sectors, but there are general ideas that apply to hydropower generation as well. There are some other fields that are more advanced in ESG practice than the hydropower community. So it's very interesting for us to take a look on those fields. Other solution that has appeared in the past days is about discussing diversity inside the companies. There is one data that is very interesting, and this data from the past year, that only 3% of the Forbes 500 companies, they present diversity data. even though 90% of the company has ESG reports. So they present ESG reports. Usually they are very complex documents. Carla will talk a little bit about it later. And but they don't talk a lot about diversity. And diversity is one very important point in ESG and the future of the companies in general. So what can be done, what's been doing by some companies that apply machine learning? They do image processing. So image processing is when you can go look for some information, photos and videos, and extract information from that. For instance, when you are using the social networks, they can indicate, okay, it's your photo, it's the other person. So they are looking your database of photos and recognize yourself in the photo itself. It can also classify between a cat and a dog. So there are two different things. And nowadays you have so much data that is easier every time to do those kind of things. So with those data, if image processing and also some natural process language, so you can look for the CV people are presenting, other information, you can make classification about gender, sexual orientation, marital, parental status, religion and political views, among others. Of course, I think some people, you thought, okay, it's dangerous doing those kind of things. It has to be done with responsibility, for sure. But I also want to highlight that nowadays it's possible for us to look and extract those data, even for the companies that don't want to show the data. So if you go to the LinkedIn, if you go to the Optimal Energy LinkedIn, you are going to see all of our employees there. If you go by hand, you can see, okay, how is the gender equality? You can make some evaluation. Of course, since it's lots of company, lots of people, lots of data, it's a very hard process to be done by hand. So if automation, machine learning, you can do it in a very interesting way. For the companies, it's interesting because you can provide benchmarking for the companies and also benchmarking with the schools. Why is it so important? For instance, at Optimal Energy, the first benchmarking that you decide to go over is you need to have more female staff than having the graduate college. So in engineering in Brazil, you have less than 5% of females are attending the engineering school. Since you are a company that's mainly based on electrical engineering, it's a very low number. So you decide, okay, let's see what can you do to improve this number. From the beginning, since the moment you go to the roads, try to attract the talents, for the moment you hire people and you train people all the time. So now you have 35% of our team is from female. So it's an interesting way to look at the data if it's not possible directly. So you can use machine learning, for instance. There are some companies using. So if you have a company and an investor worldwide certainly is looking for your data to see, okay, should I invest or not invest in this company? So it's very important, of course, to have a very clear and deep policy in diversity, but it's the future. People are not only looking for what you say, but they are looking for the data that's available everywhere. And machine learning can help in this solution. Other points that machine learning can help is when you are doing ESG reporting. This will be deeper discussed in the further presentations, but I'd like just to say something. First, these reports, they can be very complex depending on your activity. So it is split in three main parts. One we call scope 1, that is the direct emissions. Scope 2, that's the indirect emissions that's related to energy. So the hydropower system in general, they are scope 2 for other companies, and scope 3, that are other emission, direct emissions. What happened is very hard to evaluate each of those things. For instance, Optimal Energy, if you want to look for our indirect emissions, you have to say, okay, what's our cloud provider is doing for sustainability? What is their carbon footprint? Those kind of questions must be made and must be answered for us to understand deeply what's our real impact in the nature. For doing that, certainly you need lots of data of many people, many companies everywhere. Even simple things like business trips, you can make some benchmarking using the origin and destiny, but you also can go in the reporting of the company itself, comparing the companies and say, okay, this company for the same business trip is greener than the other company. So if you look this as a big picture, it's very easy to understand. You need data for so many sources that is not very simple to organize. Of course, there are some systems that nowadays help you doing that, usually looking for your own data, so you look for direct emissions, and also using benchmarking for electricity and the indirect emissions. And when I say benchmarking, for instance, I say per megawatt, how much is my carbon footprint? So in Brazil, for instance, the government publishes it every year, and most of the countries nowadays, they also publish some results about it. And this is interesting because you can make a data mining, collect data from everywhere, and with this data, you can help you producing your ESG reports. Of course, with consultancies, people do it also by hands, help you to understand the best way to get to this data. Other thing that can be done if machine learning has been doing by some company is evaluation the report itself, the quality, if it is well structured, if the numbers together they make sense, and try to find some flaws detection. Of course, in a very big reporting, if you don't have a tool, Carla, you present some tools that they have developed to automate this process and help to decrease these flaws. But you have to have some intelligence also to help you to say, okay, this is anomaly. What is happening? Other points that's a look for the future, you have to start looking for forecasting. Okay, not only what we have now, but also where are you going to? And forecasting, one of the strengths of machine learning in general, neural networks and other technologies. So with the data, historical data, you can also use machine learning to improve the ESG reporting. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit and a little deeper about hydropower case. So the focus now will be about operational intelligence and analytics. In the photo, you see one hydropower dam, and these black things are fishes. So, of course, you are in a river, you have lots of fishes. And one of the problems that can take place is the operation of the hydropower itself can kill the fishes for many reasons. And I'll go deeper later on. But in general, the hydropower, as is well known, it has a very high interaction with the environment in general, because it's in a river basin, and it has connection with many things. First things, it has to consider the multiple use of water. The water that's used to generate energy is used for many other things, for agriculture, for transportation, for leisure, for many things. So when you are operating a hydropower power plant, you have to look how it integrates with the other use of water. And it can be very complex in many senses. For instance, if you have a certain level in your river, it can make better or worse for the transportation, for instance. On interaction the power plants have in the environment, it's what we call flood control. That's controlling the level of water when you have a lot of rain. And if the climate change, it can become more common, have floods and also have droughts. One problem that can happen, depending on how you operate your plant, is waves downstream. So you can generate waves downstream, and those waves can bring many problems. For instance, there is a power plant in Brazil, depending on the flow, that it's delivering, this wave can put down the bridge that's downstream. Seasonal constraints is also very important for the ESG of hydropower. And in some places, many places, for instance, the fish, they have some seasonal movements. So they go to the sea certain time of the year, the other time of the year they go up the river, usually for reproducing. So the hydropower has to be connected with those walls and looking how it interacts to be in line with the ESG practices. When I'm telling now about ESG practice, it's going beyond only reporting. It's looking also for improvements all the time. And what is interesting, when you put machine learning on this, you can understand the past and predict the future. So you have measured data, for instance, upstream, the downstream level. You have the generate power, natural inflow, among others. And with those data, you can learn many things. You can predict the discharge using the yield curve, unit commitment, and many other things. The discharge is very hard to be measured. The discharge impacts in many environmental constraints of a hydropower. You can predict the next level of up and downstreams, because it's important, because you have also to make operation looking for the future. You can predict the water velocity using the data. Of course, you need some measurements to validate that as well, but it has very large impacts on the fish, for instance. I'd like to show you one graphic. It's a project that was made by CEMIG, that's a Brazilian generation company. It's called Peixe Vivo, that's a live fish. So they have done manually these green parts, some control in the power plants to avoid killing fish. So the first part is the historical data. The second part is after the control. Of course, this was a very huge work with many people involved, many researchers, those of millions of dollars involved in this project. But you see, there is a real decrease in the mass of dead fish in the scenarios. It proves that using the data is very important. So you can start doing it manually, but if you want to do it in a large scale all the time, the best solution is using also machine learning. So us at Optimizer Energy, you have developed a new solution that's called Hydropower Environmental Monitoring. And this applies techniques of digital twin, optimization, and machine learning to provide real-time dashboards about some environmental constraints that are related to the operation of the hydropower. So this is our dashboard. It is in Portuguese. We have not a version in English yet, but it may have it in the next years, the next months. So it has the data that's measured. It makes a modeling for other data that is not measured, make projections, and make a dashboard that can show you how is your level of violations that you have in your measures that you should take in place. People, that is all. Thank you very much. If you want to keep on contacts, my email is douglas.vieira@optimoenergy.com.br. Feel free to get in contact to have many more solutions and many other things that you can provide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Douglas, for your presentation. I'd like to invite now our second speaker, which is Luisa Valentin, and she will talk about ESG best practices in the data center industry. Luisa is Director of ESG and Energy at Scala Data Centers, where she leads its Latin American energy portfolio and ESG strategy. Prior to joining Scala, Luisa has managed multiple business strategy and technology projects in the energy and climate change areas. With expertise both in Latin and North American markets, her areas of interest are new energy services, renewable business models, decarbonization strategies, electric mobility business models, clean tech innovation, sustainability policies, and strategies. So, Luisa, it's up to you now. You can feel free to give your presentation. I'd like to reinforce, if you have any questions to any of our speakers, you can send on YouTube transmission, there is a chat, or on our Q&A session, you can open your mic and ask a question to any of our speakers. So feel free to ask any questions, okay? So Luisa, thank you very much once again. It's with you now.
Thank you, Mateus, for the introductions. First of all, I would like to thank Optimal Energy for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to share this panel with Carla and Douglas, and especially when I have the opportunity to share some of the best practice in the data center industry when we think about economic digitalization and how the data centers are in the heart of this transformation. So when I thought about my presentation, I thought it would be interesting to share a little bit of the challenge the data center industry has and what we're doing here at Scala. And it will be a little bit different from what Douglas and Carla will show, because they will talk a little bit about technology solutions, and I will talk a little bit about the challenge technology company find on implementing an ESG agenda. Okay, so first I would like just to introduce you quickly to Scala. So we are a data center platform focused on large data consumers, such as, we called it hyperscale consumers, such as Facebook, Google, and Amazon. We are a very young company. It was founded last year with operations in Brazil and planned expansion to Latin America. Our major owner is an investment fund, a North American investment fund called Digital Bridge, with more than 25 years of experience in the digital ecosystem with fiber companies, telecom towers, and data centers. So you can see here in the map the 22 portfolio companies that this fund invests, and Scala is here together with Highline in Brazil, with more than 35 billion of assets invested. You can go forward. When talking about Scala here in Brazil, we are focused on large data centers with a capacity around 100 megawatts and concentrated in large campus. We have 4 data centers operational in Brazil and in the state of São Paulo. And we have a very ambitious plan for a rapid and structured expansion to Latin America, with operations in Mexico, Colombia, and Chile. And our plan is also considering to increase in 10 times our capacity in Brazil. Okay, so when talking about the ESG agenda in the data center industry, I think when we look at ESG, the environment impact is the most important one. So I don't know if everyone here is aware, but data centers are one of the largest energy consumers globally. We estimate that data centers consume between 1 to 4% of the total electricity produced globally. And in the US, it can reach about 5%. So it's huge. And the growth it's exponential. So in the next 8 years, it's projected to grow 50%. And especially when we consider the use of cloud and IoT. So this is going to be even higher. So knowing this challenge of the large energy consumption and water consumption, the technology sector is paving the way for the energy transition globally. When we look, and the example I brought here in terms of energy, renewable energy, when we look at PPA agreements, which the acronym for power purchase agreements, when we analyze among the power purchase agreements, renewable power purchase agreements signed globally, 40% of these were sourced by technology players. They account for almost 35 gigawatts of energy, of renewable energy. So the technology companies, they own 20% of the total contracts, with a high penetration of solar and wind energy, as you can see in the graph on the left. So solar is the yellow and wind blue, in the blue color. So they lead the amount of contracts and the amount of energy being negotiated. When we look at the graph on the right side, we can see the top off-takers, the largest off-takers of renewable energy. Among the 10 largest off-takers, 4 are technology companies, and the top 3, Amazon, Google, and Facebook, they are also technology companies, and they account for 80% of the volume negotiated. So these examples here, these numbers here shows how these companies are driving the renewable energy growth globally, which is very important for the ESG agenda, as we know that 75% of the emissions globally come from fossil fuels, and this is very important for this energy transition. So the technology companies, they recognize that their impact and the opportunity for them to drive transformation, not only in terms of energy adoption, but in terms of developing new business models, decreasing renewable energy prices. So they have lead the way, and they were key to this transformation globally. So I think this topic about renewable energy is very important when we talk about this industry, because these companies are not only changing their business, but causing transformation in the supply chain. So when we sell data center services or other suppliers sell services to these companies, they need to be compliant with a set of KPIs and a set of requirements in terms of carbon emissions, carbon footprint, renewable energy adoption, water usage effectiveness. So this is very interesting because this is already a requirement in the sector. So these companies, when they source service or they source, data center services, which is the case of Scala, we need to be compliant with these requirements. Okay. So my last slide here is to share a little bit on what we are doing. So what we are doing at Scala. Since we started operations last year, we are aware of our impact, and I think most important in our environment impact is the understanding that we have an opportunity to create value and differentiate our business in the market. So we started procuring renewable energy, so we now operate with 100% renewable energy and certified energy. What does it mean? We have renewable energy certificates, known as IRECs, for 100% of our consumed energy. This is a lot because we are one of the largest consumers of energy in the world. So this is quite an accomplishment for our first year of operation. We also were able to achieve carbon neutrality. This started since the beginning of our operations, that we reduce energy consumption more than 40%. So with very, let's say, very effective energy efficiency measures. And then we also worked with carbon offsets. So since our first year, we are carbon neutral. And the idea is to, accomplish this neutrality each year in order to have a long-term target, net zero target in the following years. And this is very important to us because we are the first data center company in Latin America offering colocation services that is 100% renewable and carbon neutral. So for us, we see as a very important competitive advantage. And I would also highlight our compromise on recycling. So we engaged in a green IT program together with Furukawa, which is an organization here in Brazil, to recycle our IT equipment. So in the first year, we accomplished to recycle 2 tons of equipment. And we're also very excited with this program in order to give an example in the industry. So the last comment I have here is that we have a dedicated area to work with ESG, and we have this report that's very known in the data center industry, ESG Provider Lens, and we recognize even being such a young company as a colocation leader in Brazil. And I think the ESG KPIs were highlight for us among the other competitors. And I think this shows a little bit of the market recognition for the agenda we are implementing. So I think with this, I'm trying to share very briefly a little bit of what we achieved and in the context of the challenge this industry have. So many of the companies I mentioned, Facebook, Google, Apple, and Microsoft, IBM, I have a lot of companies to mention here, but we have a long way, but this is how the market is dealing with this ESG agenda, and that's it. Go ahead. And here I leave, next slide, please. Okay, come back, just one slide. Okay, so I thank you everyone again for being here. I'm available for Q&A questions, so feel free to post your questions for us to discuss. Here you get my email and my contacts, and I also invite you to visit our website. Thank you.
Luisa, thank you very much for your presentation. And lastly, I will invite our last speaker, which is Carla Leal, and she will talk about technology and ESG management. Carla Leal is board member, executive, and mentor in ESG and innovation. Currently, she is the director of growth at Way Carbon, mentor of the Innovative Startups Acceleration Program, and member of the IBGC, Brazilian Institute of Corporate Governance. Innovation Commission. Carla has 30 years of professional experience at technology companies, Oracle, Hyperion, and other, and consulting companies, Deloitte and Origin. Besides 17 years of MBA teaching experience in sustainability and finance. Carla has a bachelor degree, a master, and a PhD in finance with thesis on the financial impacts of climate change on organizations' performance. Carla, thank you once again, and it's up with you, the presentation, and good luck.
Thank you, Mateus, for the invitation, and thank you, Douglas and Luisa, for your presentations. I'll share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see you anymore, so I'll talk here. Well, first of all, Way Carbon is currently the main ESG and climate change consulting and tech company in Brazil. We have a lot of customers with different projects regarding both ESG strategy and climate change strategies. So I'll start about talking about the ESG urgency. What we have today is that we are seeing a migration of all the investments globally to ESG funds or ESG assets. This is the global money is going to companies that are becoming more responsible in terms of environmental, social, and governance issues. So Bloomberg expects to have $53 trillion invested in companies that are responsible. But the question is, how does the market or the investor decides which assets or which companies are acceptable as good performers in ESG management? So there are a lot of frameworks that were created to to classify the, not only to classify the companies, but to address these reporting needs so the company can explain what it does regarding many different matters. So, for instance, Douglas talked about diversity and GHG emissions, and he also gave an example of biodiversity, especially in the energy sector, talking about fishes, and Luisa talked about energy, and we have diversity, and we have governance and other themes that are embraced by this whole ESG theme. So there are many different frameworks that were created in order to report what companies are really doing regarding these different things. So we have, for instance, GRI or SASB or integrated reporting. Now these two are together, but they created frameworks for companies to provide reports. So when you see at the website of the companies the sustainability reports, usually they follow these guidances to make their reports. But there are not only those patterns. We also have, for instance, rating companies like MSCI or Standard & Poor's that had created their own questionnaires to evaluate the companies regarding their performance in all those different things that are embraced by the ESG umbrella. Besides that, we also have the exchange, I forgot the term. Okay, the stock exchange indexes such as Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes or FTSE for Goods, or in Brazil we have ISE. So we have all different frameworks that are mainly different questionnaires asking many different questions regarding environmental issues or social issues or governance issues to the companies. The questions are somehow similar, but they vary in depth, or they vary in the emphasis they give to certain things according to the sector or according to their specific needs. So looking at that, what are the ESG executives' responsibilities with this scenario? And in the end of the day, now the ESG managers or the sustainability managers' job is to lead the company to better results. Because today, everything is very public. So if you go to the internet and you search for MSCI ratings or Standard & Poor's ratings, and then you insert a name of the company, it's public, their rating. So no company will like to be here in this situation, classified as a laggard company regarding ESG. So today, the sustainability executive's job is to help the companies to have a better performance regarding ESG. So what are the pains that the companies face today to achieve this objective of evolving in the ESG agenda? They have dozens of reports asking many different questions about many different issues that will have impact. Depending on their answers, will impact on the ratings the company receive, will have impact on image, as Douglas mentioned. You have now the machine learning in place, analyzing every data that the company provides to the market and classifying the company, so everything is much public today. So the answers to these reports are really important by now. And of course, it causes a lot of stress internally because you have deadlines to answer to these questionnaires and so on. And besides all that, you have a lot of new demands. For example, banks, they have their own questionnaires related to different ESG themes, or you have a news magazine that wants to do a top 100 ESG companies that comes with another questionnaire and so on. So you have a lot of new demands regarding ESG information. And each of these reports has something like 200 questions or 300 questions and 200 indicators that needs to be collected. So many of the companies still collect all this data through email and Excel. So you can imagine if you have to answer, for instance, 20 questionnaires times 200 indicators at each questionnaire. So how much email and Excel you have to manage to take care of all this data. So, so you have to control all the workflow and to make sure that all data is correct. And besides all that, the data needs to be verified. So Luisa talked a little bit about energy. So if you say that your energy consumption is a certain amount, you need to prove, you have to show the evidences that you really had that consumption. So it's not only about building dashboards and with the data. You have to also add the evidences that will prove what you are saying. And of course, everything needs to be correlated among these reports. If I answer something to one report, I have to give the same answer, or the same numbers need to appear in the other report. So have to make sure that everything is consistent among themselves. And what we see is that the companies are so busy collecting this data and make sure that everything will work and correlate and deliver the same message, that we see a lack of visibility. Usually the companies use material matrix to decide among all these hundreds of indicators which ones are the most important and the most relevant to its own business. But besides the indicators itself, we have to control what are the initiatives and what are the action plans that will really drive the evolution of the company to the next level regarding ESG performance. So we see that the companies still lack this visibility, this clear visibility, or tools that will really help for the companies to have this visibility. And as Douglas mentioned, another gap in ESG management is the forecast. Because if my business will grow, and for instance, my production will double in the next 5 years, also will my consumption of water, my consumption of energy, and the waste I generate. So how should I forecast my ESG KPIs accordingly to my expected growth? So all of these are still gaps that we have in the ESG management. So to address this gap, we at We Carbon, we have created CLIMAS, and here I have a link where you can find more information about it. But the Climas is our integrated ESG information management software. We started with our model of GHG emissions to help companies to create their GHG inventory. But now we have a different approach because we are now integrating with SAP or other ERPs tools in a way that the companies can manage their emissions, their water consumption, their waste every month and not only once a year. So we are changing the way the companies manage their ESG questions. So we have some of our benefits. We provide dashboards, and we help the companies to have the visibility over both the quantitative and the qualitative indicators that companies have to manage. And we also help the companies to have this strategic analysis over their main issues, bring more efficiency because we built all this, we have all this workflow of gathering data inside the tool, and so we release the sustainability people to do more high-level jobs, more analysis, and to help the company to establish the targets and to accomplish these targets. And also we have all this auditability in the tool, so we help the auditing process that makes all the reports more reliable to the external entities that are asking all the questions. And we have many specific features for GHG emissions management, and we bring coherence between all those data. And also we have some other important features, like we have all these logs, so I know exactly who entered the information, because the information in the end of the day, it's all spread over the organization. As Douglas mentioned, diversity, for instance, is something that will probably be answered by someone who is in the HR department. And on the other hand, as Luisa said about energy, this will be answered about someone that's responsible for facilities or for the environment area in the organization. So all this information are really widespread. And one interesting feature that we also have is not only this geographical connection, but also the possibility to have different hierarchies in the organization. So when we are talking about large companies that have many business units and many factories, for example, then we can make the business unit manager accountable for all the results regarding environmental and social and governance, sometimes in a lesser sense, but also responsible for all those aspects. So we joined all these features in Climas. That's our main solution. And here it's only a short picture of our current customers. We have customers in many different industries, but it's interesting that 16% of our customers are in the energy industry. And about 2/3 of our customers are listed companies, and their market value in August was $180 billion. This means that our customers are large companies that are really willing to evolve in the ESG agenda. And here are some of our customers in the energy segment. So I hope I didn't talk too much, as I usually do. So here are our contact if you are interested in knowing more about climas. That's our solution. And thank you again, Douglas, Matheus, and Luisa, for the invitation to speak.
Thank you very much, Carla. We really appreciated your presentation. And now we're going to a roundtable discussion. But before that, I'd like to invite everyone to our second session, second webinar on mudanças climáticas in English, climate changes, which will be held in September 15th, 9:30 Brazilian time and 1:30 GMT time. We're going to have some speakers, some guests: Diego Carneiro, Felipe Sgarbi, Ana Carla Pet, José Wanderley, Marlon, and Douglas Vieira will be hosting this presentation. So we'd like to invite everyone to attend the second webinar Optimal Energy will be hosting, okay? So now we're going to our roundtable discussion. We have prepared some questions, and then we're gonna intercalate with some guest questions we have on YouTube. And the first question is directed to Luisa. Luisa, what are the main challenges companies find to implement ESG agenda?
Thank you, Matheus. I think this is a very good question. I would say that the challenge number one is to understand what the impacts the business have, because ESG comprises a lot of topics, right? We talked here about diversity, we talked here about carbon emissions, water usage, and so on. So I think the first challenge is to understand and look inside the business and see what is my impact, what is my critical opportunities here. So I think this is the largest challenge the companies have. So they need to exercise internally. Some use materiality maps and exercises to understand what the impacts are, and then you can focus correctly on this. I think a second challenge that we have, and I think the companies go through this, is to have the C-level mobilized and convinced of the importance of this agenda and how this is strategic for the business. So I think this is a second challenge that we deal every day here at Scala. I mean, I'm lucky to be in a company that can see this challenge as strategic, but usually this is something that ESG professionals need to work with. And I think the last one that I would say is to structure an action plan. So the companies sometimes struggle a little bit to have a very assertive and structured action plan. And this is something that they will find this challenge, but they need to work on that with the prioritized topics, with KPIs to measure, and how to disclose this information. So I think this is another challenge. But with these three things working, I think the companies are in a good way to proceed to implement a successful ESG agenda.
Thank you, Luisa. And Carla, what are the main trends in GHG management?
Well, climate change have become very important, and one of the main things when we think about the global challenges. So companies are being requested to present their GHG emissions in a more complete way. So as Douglas explained briefly in his presentation, when a company does its inventory, it uses it to report mainly its scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. This is their own emissions and the emissions that are caused by the energy consumption. But what we see now as a new trend is the scope 3 emissions. So companies are being requested to provide and to show what are the emissions of their suppliers and of their product consumption. So this brings much more challenge to the organizations to collect their data and to provide the complete a complete view of its emissions regarding all this all its supply chain, from the raw materials and up to the product consumption. So it's a very big challenge, and the companies are being challenged to establish targets, reduction targets that incorporate not only their own emissions, but also these extended supply chain emissions. So today, I believe this mitigation is emissions mitigation is the main challenges that the companies are facing, and as a consequence, the GHG emissions management is a necessary step to address this goal.
Thank you, Carla, for your answer. It was really helpful to us. I hope everyone is having doubts, so we can ask questions for our speakers. We also have a question here by Paulo Liana. Carla, about the frameworks you showed, are there assessments and the grades they give to a certain company somehow linked to an explicit advantage in access to funding or public subsidies in any particular country? Thanks and congrats to all for the event. Carla, what can you say to Paulo about this question?
Well, Paulo, thank you for your question. It requires kind of a more or less difficult explanation, but companies usually have two main sources of financing to expand its operations. So the first source is banks, or so if you go to the bank and you ask for loans, for example, then the banks are more and more demanding this kind of commitments of the companies regarding ESG, because they can see if the company doesn't comply with the ESG kind of targets, it can be seen by the banks as more riskier companies. So this is why sometimes the spread goes up when you are not a good ESG company. But also the banks sometimes provide opportunities for climate-linked bonds or other kind of bonds that are linked to specific ESG themes. So the company pays less fees if it achieves some ESG targets as GHG reductions, for instance. So this is the first. And the second source of financing for a company is the stock exchange market or a private investor, for instance. And what we are seeing in the capital markets is that all the investors are requiring more responsibility on the companies regarding these ESG things. So when I started talking about this flow of money to the companies that are best ESG performance, this means that the companies that are good performance will have better access or easier access to money. So there will have more money available for companies that are more responsible. So in the end of the day, if there are more money, they are cheaper money. If you are not responsible, you will have to address this smaller part of the money that will for sure be more expensive. So in the end of the day, it makes easier or cheaper to access money if you are a responsible company. Sorry for the complex answer.
Oh, thank you, Carla. I hope Paulo is happy with your answer. And now we have a question for Douglas. Douglas, what is the role of startups and innovation for the hydropower future?
Okay, thank you very much. It's certainly a very nice, important question. Me and Carla are here in startup, looking for the future. And my belief is there is no better future without innovation and sustainability. So both things must go hand in hand. I don't see any other solution. And for instance, when I see the climates, as the software for a carbon, I get very impressed because it's a very nice solution to help people all the time. And the startups, they are very willing to cooperate. So when I see Carlos' solution, I think, how can I plug in my own solution together with their solution? Because their solution is one step above our solution, looking for how to report, how to communicate. While the solution I have made in my presentation, they're very connected to the operational level. How can I get that operational level data, raw data, and bring it in terms of a KPI? So in this sense, the hydropower sector is a long existing sector with very well stabilized technology that I've been using for a century, probably. And now you are in need to bring innovation. And the startups can fulfill this role with dynamic ideas, if some risk-taking, because for you to make this big challenge and solution, you have to take some risks. So on those sense, it's very important for the hydropower community to take a look on the startup, to motivate, to have connections. The International Hydropower Association is talking about it very openly, how to have the startups on board. Traditionally, it's only for the big generators, but nowadays, it's not enough. It's not enough. You cannot work alone. You have to work with other people with different ideas in different contexts. Energia is a company that's specialized in some technologies that's not the main core of hydropower generators, such as machine learning that I have presented here, digital twin, among others. So in this sense, I think it's fundamental. It's very important as well that the big companies are willing to put money. The startup, they cannot starve without money. So it's very common, I think, in rich countries, less common that people are more willing to put money and invest in risky projects. But you are running against time. This is a fact. When you look for climate change, the time is passing faster than you have expected. In Brazil, you are in a shortage of energy. You are a country that's mainly sustainable. You rely a lot on renewables. So it's a characteristic of our country. We should be very proud of it. But you are having problems for the impact of climate change. So you have to study, you have to understand, you have to make research, so you have to innovate. And this has to become, at some point, solutions and product. It's only possible if the involvement of startups. So this is my belief. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. We have a second question here for Luisa. Luisa, what examples of technologies can be adopted to implement the ESG agenda?
Okay, Matheus, thank you for the question. I think Carla and Douglas mentioned some of the technologies we have. So machine learning, we have different applications for machine learning. And Carla mentioned Climas, which is a KPI software for monitoring ESG programs and KPIs. I think this is a key technology because the companies need to implement an ESG agenda, but also to monitor it. So I think this is a very important technology. I think we also have climate risk, physical risks technology to analyze. So for the data center, for example, it's very important to forecast the potential climate risk, physical risk that we can have in terms of lack of rain and earthquakes and things like that. So I think this is another set of technologies that the companies will need to look at. But I would also mention some innovation technologies that help to decarbonize the company's portfolio or company's operations. So let's say, for example, batteries. Let's talk a little bit about hydrogen. And I think all this set of innovation technologies that always come together with softwares are very important for this market.
Thank you, Luisa, for your answer. And we have a second question here from our audience. André Rocha is asking Douglas, who will pay for the more optimal and clean energy?
Okay, it's a very nice question. And I like also, after Carla helped me with this answer as well, because there are many issues that are related. The first point, if you look in the long term, it's better and cheaper to be sustainable. So we are wasting energy most of the time. We are not looking for the right efficiency that you should have. And the renewables by itself, they have a very high investment cost, not so high now, but also after the operation costs get lower. So we have one problem now is how to finance the transition. So after you can finance the transition, you can have cheaper energy. So it looks for me more like a short-term problem than a long-term problem. On those sense, when you say about long-term things, you have to involve the government. There ain't no solution because you have to look 20, 30, 50 years ahead. If I'm looking to make a new considerable power plants, this is the scenario. So we have to involve the government, and also, of course, we have to involve the society. Nowadays, if you go beyond the hydropower generation, you can go to solar panels. So our company, Optimal Energy, you have solar panels that's delivering all of our energy. So it's distributed energy. So in the end of the day, André, all of us has some responsibility on that. So you have to look and make movements to save energy, to be more sustainable. If you have the opportunity to generate your own energy, it's freedom. I get very happy. I look at my mobile phone and the results quickly. Say, okay, I've generated lots of energy. It makes me happy. It would make you happy as well. But I believe it's this conjunction of the society, the government, and also the companies. They have to look for the future and look in the long term. It makes all the sense. You don't have to make subsidies of things like this. If you can help me, Carla, please.
Yeah.
Some ideas.
Yeah, I was laughing because maybe the question is the other way around. Who's going to finance the oil companies? Because, but I would like to add to your question that we will have this year the COP26. So one of the main things that are being discussed is that the $1 trillion funding for this energy transition in the world. So countries are investing money in this transition, and this is one of the main goals of the COP26. So there will be money and for these investments in the energy. So all we'll have, all the companies need to do and the countries have to do is to really engage in this agenda to make sure that they have the right projects to assess this money. So this is my answer. And I'm sorry for the joke, but we are really seeing the oil companies being suffering a lot of pressure to exchange the way they generate power and energy.
Thank you, Carla. Luisa, any thoughts on that?
I totally agree with what Douglas and Carla said. I think renewable energy today is cheaper, so you can find everywhere globally when you see the prices of wind and solar, they are already cheaper than other sources of energy. And I think the companies are engaged. So us, for example, we are totally engaged on having 100% renewable energy, and our customers are asking us for that. So I don't think we have a challenge to finance this transition, because we have different instruments, we have different companies engaged. So I think this is the future, and there is no other way around. So.
Thank you very much, guys. We're finishing our session now. I'd like to invite all of you to give a final message to our audience. Feel free to say anything you want about our topic here. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching us, for participating on this session, and thank you very much. So, Douglas, Carla, Luisa, you're free now to give your final message to our audience, okay?
Since you told my name first, I'll be the first one to provide this final message. I'd like to expect that everyone is leaving this webinar more optimistic, with a better perspective from the future, because there are many people looking for a more sustainable way of living, many tools. So I believe, even though we are living hard times, the climate change is taking place. I have the optimism that if you put together new technologies in a huge effort, with the right amount of money, because certainly you need money, we have solutions. And it will be a solution that will lead us to a better way of living in general. It'll be cheaper, you'll be nicer, you'll be cleaner, you smell better, you'll be better in many senses. So I hope everyone is optimistic about the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you again for this invitation. And I'm also optimistic, Douglas. And I think when we think about humanity as a whole and how we will reach 10 billion people, we need to think as leaders in a way that we have a better world in terms of environmental issues and also social issues. How we educate all these people, how do we feed all these people, how we provide jobs that make the people accountable for their own lives, and how we provide a better environment so the people can live in a good way. And so this is really important, that every company takes its steps and that every person do what is right to be done, so we have a better world for us and for the future generations. So I'm also optimistic that there are a lot of people engaged in this cause and doing the right thing.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the participation for the audience. I think my last message is technology will be certainly the key. It's very important for the ESG agenda and for the energy transition. And I totally, as as a representative of a company here, I think I totally encourage all the companies to engage in partnerships, to look at technologies available, because they will be key for this transition. And technology will not exist without data centers. So I totally encourage the companies to have data center providers that are renewable, carbon neutral, and are engaged in this agenda. So this is my last message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. So now we are ending our session, and we wish you a good end of week. Okay? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.